Who's shouldering the blame today, Freach?
You ask me this all the time, guys. Like, if they don't make the playoffs, who's gonna take the brunt? Like, do you think anyone's getting unscathed, like getting away unscathed if that happens?
But there are tiers to this.
You know what? At the end of the day, look, like, you couldn't listen to Keefe after that game last night and not think about Babcock.
Correct.
It's 100% the same stuff that Babcock was saying. And, look, like, the players wanted to change. They got the change. You can talk about, like I think they made the one deal today for Mulligan. I think they're definitely looking for bottom six forwards to add some depth. We know they're looking for a right shot D, but the biggest difference between these two teams last night, aside from all those ridiculous passes that Crosby was making, was one team wanted it a lot more than the other one did. Malkin skates off during the warm-up, can't go because he's sick, and Pittsburgh dominated. They won every battle. Like, at some point in time, the will has to match the skill. And it wasn't there last night. It wasn't even close. And they got a rematch tomorrow. And if one team doesn't compete as hard as the other one does, it's not going to matter.
Elliotte, you have your ear to the ground as much as anyone in the business. The one thing that we have come to learn about Sheldon Keefe and Kyle Dubas is that they seem to be in sync, that their communication seems to be really good, and that Sheldon Keefe wouldn't say the things that he said last night without having the blessing of Kyle Dubas. Do you think by the end of this week, or even by the last two games, that Kyle Dubas's confidence in the way he was shaping this franchise has been shaken by the way it's gone over the last couple of days?
No, I don't believe that. I think Kyle Dubas believes in his vision. And, the one thing I believe is this: when Washington won the Cup in 2018, it taught me a lot about growth and perspective, right? There was a time when nobody believed Washington was going to win the Stanley Cup. They didn't have a chance. They were never going to figure it out. They were never going to get there. It took them a long time to get there, but they got there. And how did they get there? They learned. They suffered brutal losses. They changed coaches multiple times. They eventually got there. They grew up and they got there. They built a team and they got there. And Washington won as much about everything they learned through defeat as opposed to anything else. I think that these guys in Toronto, I would bet on their skill. I really would. And I think they are going to get there eventually. But they're not there now. And the difference between Washington and Toronto is Backstrom was signed for 10 years. Ovechkin was signed for 13 or whatever it is. Like, Toronto's contracts aren't that long. You can't make those contracts that long anymore. But I think Dubas looks at it and says, our guys are going to be like Washington's guys. They're going to get there. Now, they have to get there faster than they did, and they're going to have to learn their lessons quicker than those other guys did. But I don't think that's shaken his core belief that a team of skill can win once it figures out how to properly merge that skill with everything else they have to do. And I think that that's what he's going to bet on. Now, I do think the team has got to become edgier. I do think the team has got to become meaner. I think it has to be more than willing to win battles than it is now. I think it has to handle better when things go wrong than they do now. But I don't think that means that Dubas doesn't believe in his vision, and I don't think that shakes his belief in this particular group.
Only an idiot would compare this Leafs team to the Washington Capitals.
Or a smart bald man here in the studio.
I did it earlier in the show, and I got ripped for it. So, but you added the caveat about the long-term
Doesn't mean you're
deals.
wrong. It doesn't mean you're wrong.
Look, let's go back a decade ago, okay? Or even shorter than, never mind a decade ago. Let's go back 5 years. Did you ever think the Capitals were going to win the Stanley Cup?
Never.
Yeah. No, and I think most of the hockey world felt the same way, and especially fans. They were just, they're not that until they are. And that's kind of the case with a lot of teams, right? If you believe in the talent, no matter what league, no matter what, sometimes you just have to show patience in that talent, and eventually they will get there. It's just hard to do that in the moment.
It absolutely is. 100% is. I totally get that. And the thing that has changed now in the NHL is that, it's a younger league than ever, and the youngest players get paid more than ever. And with that, expectations come. When these guys are making the money they make, the fans focus on them. They say, okay, you're getting paid for this, now you got to deliver. But it doesn't always mean you're ready right away to deliver. Everybody's got to learn. And I think you bet on your talent. And I know today everybody in Toronto wants to burn down the city. And this season, like if I'm the Maple Leafs, I don't think I'm making rental deals this year. But it doesn't mean I'm not making a more term deal because I believe that this group is going to figure it out. I believe they will eventually figure it out. I just think that it's not happening as fast as anybody would like it to be.
Elliotte Friedman here on Tim and Sid. Where does Tyson Barrie fit into what you just said there, Fried? Because you brought up last night, it's intriguing whether the Leafs are playing well or not. This is a guy that just hasn't been what people expected him to be. What are the odds he gets moved regardless of how they look on the ice?
I don't know. I'd hate to give you a number. What I think is, if you go back a couple of weeks, the intel I had, Sid, was that Toronto was going to take the time up until the deadline to figure out what they were going to do with their rentals and if they needed to bring in another D. Now, I think they always looked at it like if they could find a right shot D or a D who could play right side, who they could control for a while, they were willing to do that. And this was before CeCe got hurt, and this is before Janssen got hurt. And I think they had multiple balls in the air to say, okay, if we bring somebody in and to make it work cap-wise, we're going to have to move somebody out, what's the value on their guys? Look, we saw what happened yesterday. We saw what the value is on rental deals. I think they know that if they put Barrie out there, there'd be interest in him. It hasn't fit this year between Barrie and the Maple Leafs, but that doesn't mean that Barrie's a bad player.
Right.
I think there are people out there who think that Barrie could help them in the playoffs. But the bottom line is, I don't think Toronto's going to give up on their season. And if trading him makes them worse or they can't do anything to make themselves better, I don't see it happening. But if there's another move that comes and it gives them the ability to look, they've lost a bunch of picks. They traded a couple of picks for Campbell and Clifford. We know about the pick they traded with Marleau. I think if they did something else that made themselves strong and they wanted to reacquire picks, I think they know they could do it.
NHL insider Elliotte Friedman joining us here on Tim and Sid. It's hard to call the Montreal Canadiens sellers when Shea Weber rushes back to the lineup, but when they get swept by the Detroit Red Wings, you can look at it maybe a little differently today?
Well, I think also they moved Scandella, right?
Yeah.
So that tells you everything I think you need to know. Look, I think Bergevin is one of the most intriguing guys because one thing we know, he's not afraid to make a big deal. I think they're going to try to re-sign Petrie as soon as July 1st. I think their plan was to keep Tatar, but some of these prices, and if he gets offered it, I think it might make him think a little bit. The Kovalchuk we all know about. If I was them, I'd trade him and then bring him back if he wanted to come back in the summer. I mean, the Domi one is interesting. Like, I've heard his name out there. I've had people tell me he's not out there. I don't know what to make of that one. He's not afraid. He's shown if he gets what he wants, he'll do it. And I think he's a bit of a wild card on this day.
Elliotte Friedman here on Tim and Sid Sportsnet 590 The Fan. The Canucks had a roller coaster week. Some bad news injury-wise. They pick up Tyler Toffoli.
Yep.
I don't know how much better they are. I don't know how much worse they are. I don't mind Toffoli, but obviously they took some hits. If you're other teams in that Pacific, specifically Calgary or Edmonton, and you see a move like that, does that nudge you towards jumping into the trade market a little bit, or is it not that significant a move where it would indulge Ken Holland and Brad Treliving to do that?
I think the one team that may look at what other groups are doing around them and say, okay, we're going to do something because I think they want to anyway, is Boston. I don't think Calgary and Edmonton are looking at Vancouver and saying, okay, they did that, so we have to do something. I do think Boston's looking around at what Tampa did, what Pittsburgh did, what Washington did, and I think they can win the Cup anyway with their group. So I think they're going to do something. I think they're just waiting to see what the piece is going to be. With Calgary and Edmonton, like with Calgary, I'm not sure I'd be doing a rental. Like I think at one time Calgary was in on Toffoli, but they weren't paying that price for him, and if I was them, I don't think I would either. Edmonton, I think, has interest in Pajot. I'm just not sure they're going to be able to make it work with all those injuries. And also, Edmonton is very careful about what they'll pay for a rental. I think they were willing to do a first-rounder for Blake Coleman, but I don't think they're willing to do it for Jean-Gabriel Pajot. I think that they have a plan, and they want to stick to that plan, and I think that's the smart move. You look at that list of guys, hey, the prices have been pretty expensive. Unless you think you're getting a steal because some team gets desperate because it can't get their guy off the bus right now, it's going to cost you to do something. If I was Calgary, I don't think I'd be doing rentals, at least unless it was an inexpensive rental, like a 4th or 5th rounder. I'm not giving up a second and a prospect if I'm the Flames. Vancouver hasn't made the playoffs in 5 years. I think they think their team's pretty good. I think their position's a little bit different than the Flames. And I think the Oilers have a plan, and they're going to stick to that plan, and I think that's the right move.
Elliotte Friedman here on Tim and Sid. What about Wayne Simmons? Is there a chance that he moves?
Yes, I think there's a chance he moves. Vancouver, Jim Benning said yesterday he's not that interested in trading any more picks. I think if the Devils had interest in a player like maybe Hugh Levy, I could see the Canucks trying that. I do think they have interest. I think there will be interest in Simmons. But I think, in New Jersey, you got to keep somebody, don't you? I mean, I think that's more likely than not they keep Palmieri, but I think teams are going to try. But at some point in time, you got to keep veteran players for those guys to play with.
Breach, before we go, especially yesterday when the flurry of moves happened, I find on Twitter, and I was guilty of it as well, one of the knee-jerk tweets is, well, the insiders won't have a lot to talk about on Monday come deadline. I did send out a tweet along those lines. Am I a D-bag for sending out the tweet, or do you get the joke as well, considering you are an insider in our business? Should I have done that is what I'm asking you.
Sid, I already know you're a D-bag.
Okay,
it's not for that. No, I got no problem with that.
Okay.
I got no problem with that.
All right.
I know you're, like I said, we've worked together for a long time. It'd take a lot for you to offend me.
No, I appreciate that kind of, but it is a long day. I wanted to ask the question. We're colleagues.
That's true.
I just wanted to,
I got no problem with that.
All right.
I got no problem.
Well,
with
enjoy
that.
the Gesundheit concert this summer, or whatever you're going to see. And hopefully things settle down, and Monday's
it's
a nice
squeeze,
active day.
not
Sorry.
sneeze.
Whatever.
Okay,
Right.
it's
Sorry.
squeeze.
Squeeze,
That's why you're the
sneeze.
insider.
Yeah.
Elliotte Friedman.